You know, in the world of high stakes finance, we're all taught that numbers are king, right? But what if I told you that when it comes to climate investments, something way more human is pulling the strings? Let's dig in and figure out what that is.
So, what is this mystery force? What's really directing all that capital into green tech and renewables? I mean, is it really just about the carbon credits and the ESG scores?
Well, the answer is surprisingly simple. It's not the spreadsheets, it's the story. And that's what we're going to unpack today, how these powerful, compelling narratives are actually shaping how we invest in the future of our planet.
All right, so for our first section, Beyond the Numbers, we're going to peel back the layers of all that financial data. And what we're going to find is that behind every single major climate investment, it's not just a balance sheet. It's a deep-seated belief in a very specific story about what our future could look like. Okay, so let's see how this actually plays out in Section 2, From Fear to Opportunity. This is where things get really interesting because it's our first big clue, a massive shift in storytelling that completely unlocked the financial floodgates.
Okay, just look at the contrast on this slide. It says it all. For the longest time, the climate story was all about fear, right? Melting ice caps, rising seas, all that doom and gloom. And sure, that got our attention, but for investors, it just screamed risk. It led to total paralysis. But now, the story has completely flipped. It's a story of opportunity. We're talking clean energy innovation, a whole new investment class. It's about hope, and most importantly, action.
And this gets to the heart of it. It's a concept called hope-based framing. Think about it. Just by reframing climate action, not as this huge, costly sacrifice, but as a smart, strategic investment, the entire game changed. Suddenly, this wasn't about charity anymore. It was about being a savvy, forward-thinking investor.
And this quote just nails it. The shift from "we're doomed" to "we can build better," that's everything. That single pivot gave investors a powerful reason to believe, not just in saving the planet, but in creating the next wave of massive value.
Okay, so you have this powerful new story of opportunity. But how did it spread so fast and so effectively? Well, that brings us right into our next section, How Media Shapes Belief. Let's get into the massive role the media plays in all of this. You have to think of the media as this giant global stage. It casts the characters for us, right? You've got the innovators as the heroes and the old school industries as the villains. And this creates this really powerful emotional pull for investors. I mean, who doesn't want to back the hero? But, and this is a huge but, it also opens the door to things like narrative inflation, where the promises get bigger and bigger, but there's no real action to back them up. It becomes all about performing progress instead of making it. But why? Why are these stories so incredibly powerful? Why do they work on us so well? To answer that, we need to dive into the core engine of all this. In Section 4, The Psychology of Story. This is all about how our brains are literally hardwired for narrative, not for numbers. And really, it all boils down to this simple truth. Think about it. A spreadsheet full of carbon emissions data, it's abstract, it's cold. But a story about a visionary company that's going to change the world, now that connects with who we want to be, with our emotions. It makes us feel like we're part of something bigger.
There's actually a theory for this. It's called moral emotion theory. And the basic idea is that positive emotions, things like hope, pride, empathy, are way more effective at getting us to commit to something long-term than negative emotions like fear or guilt. That opportunity story we talked about, it's a direct pipeline to those positive feelings, making an investment feel less like a financial transaction and more like a noble cause.
And this process, it's fascinating how it works. Psychologists have a term for it, narrative transportation. Basically, when you get totally sucked into a great story, your natural skepticism just fades away. You start to internalize the values of that story. And for an investor, this is huge. It can completely rewire their brain about what a valuable investment even looks like. Okay, but a tool this powerful, it's got a dark side, right? So in our next section, The Danger of Fiction, we're going to look at what happens when these amazing stories get completely disconnected from reality. And this poses a really critical question, not just for investors, but for all of us. When a story has the power to move billions of dollars, what are the real-world consequences when that story is misleading or, let's be honest, just a flat-out lie? Yeah, the biggest and most common danger here is, of course, greenwashing. This is where the story stops being a catalyst for change and instead becomes a shield to hide behind. A company will spin this beautiful tale about how green they are, while the actual data tells a completely different story. So what happens when there's just too much greenwashing out there? You get something called narrative fatigue. I mean, when every single company is telling you they're saving the planet, the words just start to feel empty, don't they? We all become numb to it. And the real tragedy is that even the companies that are doing genuinely amazing things can't get their story heard above all that noise. So, where do we go from here? Does this mean we should give up on stories altogether? Absolutely not. And that brings us to our final section, the future, authentic narratives. The answer isn't to stop telling stories, it's about telling better ones, more honest ones. The future of this really demands a new kind of maturity. The stories we tell have to be able to stand up to scrutiny. They need to be backed by transparent, verifiable data. In this new world, credibility is going to be the most valuable currency, hands down. And this also means we're going to see the rise of a new kind of expert, the climate storyteller, someone who can take all that complex data and translate it into a narrative that's not just compelling, but authentic. This quote really just sums up the entire shift perfectly. See, future investors aren't just going to ask about your carbon footprint. They're going to ask about your climate story. They'll demand the hard numbers, for sure, but they'll also demand a story that's compelling and, this is the key, truthful about where the company is actually going. And all of this leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Because whether you realize it or not, every dollar you invest is already contributing to some kind of narrative. So the real question is, what story are you choosing to be a part of?